Hi there, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a dream deferred. So, if you heard that term, but you're not really sure where it comes from a poem by Langston Hughes. I believe it's called Harlem. And there's a lot of different themes in it that we're not going to be exploring today. But there's this idea of the dream deferred. So, the reason why Lit Carnivale is so important to me is because it embodies kind of my love and joy of reading, and also this idea of not taking for granted some of the blessings in my life in the place and time that I currently live. I am not, I don't believe I am a skeptic by heart, but I am a realist, and so I know that things are not promised from day to day. And I just like the idea of immersing myself in the literary community, whether it's high literary or genre fiction or creative nonfiction, whatever that may be. I just think it's important to acknowledge where we have some blessings as kind of a society. Um, and I'm not speaking for everyone in the world. I'm coming from a very personal point of view, but it is kind of generalized to Western culture, specifically the United States. So if you're somewhere else in the world and this doesn't apply to you, I'm sorry, but I do feel like it's going to be relatable at some level. And so the reality is that because we have, advancements in technology and we live in such a fast-paced moving world that we don't really stop to kind of consider how far we've come. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have a long way to go, but there was once a time where the majority of the population could not read. And I don't mean because they weren't able to, I mean they were not allowed to. People were not allowed to learn how to read. And then even the ones who were allowed to learn how to read were only taught to read certain things and really weren't encouraged to go beyond that. And then at some point in human history, there was a dynamic shift. What cultures around the world all did it at different times, but the idea was that sharing written histories, stories, whatever that may be, became kind of socially acceptable. Like you are going to advance your society by educating your people. And so, along with that education, there's also this idea of art and entertainment. And right now, I feel like all of those things are kind of in jeopardy. I don't, like I said, I'm not a skeptic or a pessimist or anything like that. I don't currently see all of it just being shut down, especially since humans have a very rebellious nature. But I do see there is a threat, where art is no longer being valued or no longer being funded and supported. And same thing with music. If you aren't already like an established music star, it's really hard to make it in the music industry. But even beyond the music industry, if someone just wants to strum on their guitar or their banjo or, play on their drums or their bongos just because they enjoy that music, it seems to be there's becoming this idea that that's not really acceptable. Like, who are you to be playing music if you're not some platinum star? This idea that art and music somehow isn't for the people. It's only for the people if certain people dictate it. And I don't like that at all. And same thing when it comes to stories. I am just an avid fan of stories, whether they're fiction or nonfiction. I do like the creative component of fiction. I do believe that there's a lot of people, and people are entitled to their opinions, but I do believe there's a lot of people out there who just do not get value from fiction. They feel like if it's not real, it's not important. And I feel like that's just a grave misinterpretation of things. You can learn so much about reality, modern times, the past, the future, by exploring this concept of what if, or maybe how it should be, or how it could be, or how it used to be. So there's a lot to be said about fiction, even though that's not what this whole little rant is about. So, anyway, all of that is to say that I took all of these different ideas that I had and I came up with this idea of starting a book fair. Am I anywhere close to that? Nah. But it's still nice to have a dream, even it's been deferred for a very, very long time. But in my effort to cure myself of a dream deferred, I've started, reaching out and, doing things. I've started it a long time ago by interviewing authors on my blog. My blog was something that I, started writing to just to develop the habit of writing on a regular basis. The original concept of my blog to what it has become now is night and day difference, but it was just a home for my creativity. And at some point, I realized that I could use it to also promote others, and I felt like that was kind of selfish in a way, in the sense that I got something out of it too. It wasn't just a matter of me filling up space, which is, one reason that authors will sometimes do that is they just want to fill up the space. They want to have content. But for me, it was more about this idea of I enjoy reading and I want to share that with other people. Because I know a lot of people who just don't read, not because they can't read, they just don't read. I mean, we have the internet, we have video games, which there's a lot of people who don't recognize video games as art forms or forms of storytelling. And that is another grave misinterpretation. There is some amazing stories being told through video games, but that's not the point of this. I keep going on a tangent, but my point is, we have the internet, we have video games, we have our phones that we take everywhere with us, even into the bathroom. We have all of these other things that are just more interesting, more stimulating than reading. But that's where it all started from. We wouldn't have all of these other things if we hadn't come up with the primary way of sharing ideas. Well, I would say secondary. Let's be honest. The primary way of sharing ideas was through oration, oral storytelling. But stories change a lot through oral storytelling. It may not be the story you meant to tell, but you can write something down and you have that form of that story for as long as it's written down, and you can change it if you want to in another form. And so this idea of being able to write things down and come back to them time and time again, that's where it all started. But there are so many people now who just take it for granted. I am not here advocating that everybody should start reading the classics, because I've read some of them. Some of them are good, some of them, in my opinion, are garbage, but that's the idea. People are allowed to have differences of opinion and share all of these different ideas through the written word, being able to read and discuss and all that kind of stuff. And so I do think that it would be good for people to kind of maybe step away from their computers for a while, even step away from this podcast. If that's what it means to get you to read something, go ahead and put the podcast down and read something. And we do have lots of things at our fingertips. I've heard different people express opinions, and again, people are allowed to have their opinions. But if one person reads in a hardback and you read digital, it's still reading. Don't let someone tell you that that doesn't count. Even audiobooks count. It's not exactly the same, but it's very close to that same stimulation that you get from reading. You get to take in those ideas and you get to process them. So, yeah, I think we just need to be more open. I think, for one, letting people know that it's okay to like movies and like video games and like sports and all that kind of stuff and still read something from time to time that's not a meme or a caption to a TikTok post or an Instagram post or something like that. Like, you don't have to read a long book. There are short stories out there that are just mind blowing. I remember trying to explain to someone a long time ago about this, and they just were not getting it. And I stopped for a moment and I said, okay, have you ever seen the Stephen King film Stand By Me about the four boys finding the body? They're like, oh, yeah, I love that film. I said, well, that was an adaptation from a Stephen King work. And they're like, yeah, but his books are too long. And I said, actually, that was adapted from a short story. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, that was a short story. Think about it. You could go and find the original short story and read it and compare it to what you saw in the movie. That would be interesting, don't you think? And it wouldn't take you a year to do because it's a short story. It's like I blew this person's mind because they just assumed that if some kind of cinematic feature was based off some other kind of writing, that it was some large book that was going to be too much time and trouble to read. And I was just like, oh my goodness, no. Now, that is the case sometimes. I mean, there's a reason the Lord of the Ring trilogy is so long. But my point is, there is something out there for everyone to read if they just, give it a chance and not take for granted the literacy that so many of us have and don't really use. And so for me, Lit Carnival is a celebration of that, a celebration of the fact that me as a Black woman can read. Um, there was a time where that just wasn't going to happen, women all over the world, even certain people. There was a time in history, at least in Western culture, I still got to, study up on my Eastern culture a little bit, where if you weren't a clergyman in the church, you didn't read, and so I just think, why not take advantage of the current times, because they could change. Things are changing every day, not always for the good. It's not always the end of the world, but things do change. And while I can, I will. And so that is just part of my Lit Carnival dream. And even though my dream has been deferred, it won't be that way forever. And so, at least not in my heart. So, that is just what I wanted to talk about today. And guys, stay safe, be blessed, keep reading. Lit Carnivale #6, starring Toy Thomas, featuring no one else at this time. Topics discussed: a dream deferred, taking literacy for granted, finding something to read. Produced by Toy Thomas in association with the Toy Box of Words and Lit Carnivale. Directed by Toinette Toy Thomas. Thanks again to the Lit Carnivale community on Substack and YouTube. Your book fandom is here.